Hey everybody, I'm Marcy Marcusa, and I have to say on the podcast today, I just want to say, for as long as I've been at CBC, which is like 20 plus years, I am continually surprised when people come in and share the most intimate stories of their lives with us. But often what motivates people is that they understand that they are speaking for so many others who just aren't in a position where they maybe can do that publicly. And that's kind of the nature of the podcast today. This is Manitoba. We're going to explore something on the podcast that happens here and happens globally. I'm talking about domestic violence. One Manitoba woman is sharing her story, a lot of details of her story. We're going to call her Sarah because we're protecting her identity. She's a survivor of a previous relationship that was full of emotional, financial, and physical abuse. And today we're going to hear why she shares and also how, as I mentioned, she's helping to raise awareness of domestic and intimate partner violence so that others can step forward as well if they should choose to do so, but also so that they can find resources in our province. A warning, this conversation deals with intimate partner violence. Tell me a little bit about what you feel like when you share, because I think that's important to ask.
It took me a few years, even after leaving the relationship, to start speaking out loud of things that had happened. While I shared certain details with close friends and family, I left a lot of it out. And I think it's because a part of me knew how much harm I endured during that relationship and how toxic it was, but I was ashamed. And I think, too, because I was in that relationship for 8 years. And it took me a long time to leave. But when I finally did leave, and, this is the first year, I think I've been out of that relationship now for 3 years, and I'm starting to talk about it more publicly and sharing my experiences and realizing that there are a lot of other women that have either encountered similarities, have same stories, or, in those current relationships. And I'm just hoping that by sharing my own experiences, it helps people understand, intimate partner violence a little bit more and how to support folks going through it.
You said 8 years you were in the relationship. When would you first say that you realized that it was abusive and could say that?
Yeah, we met, I was 17, so very young. And then in the first 2 years, things seemed to go swimmingly well. And there was probably a few warning signs of aggression and anger, but I just thought, this is just who he is.
What do you mean by warning signs?
There would be times where he would start throwing a few household items, whether it was a remote or dishes or punching a wall, which seemed small to me at the time. But from over there, it progressed to the point where he would smash and break end tables, coffee tables, bookshelves. He flipped the bed one time when I was sleeping on it out of anger. And just breaking basically everything that was in our home at the time.
So it escalated beyond there, and then you first realized this was something else. What happened?
I didn't feel the need to call the police, which sounds really silly when I say it out loud now.
Nothing is silly.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
But there were most definitely, our neighbors who would call in police, and they would come and do check-ins. And that for 1 year, there was probably at least 6+ police calls that were made from either myself or people who would hear the yelling and crying. And even in that state, I just thought, oh no, I have to be a better partner. I have to do better on my side so that he's not going to react in these ways, which most definitely was not the right mindset, but that's how I felt in those times.
Only in so much you're willing to share and comfortable sharing and see value in sharing. I mentioned emotional, financial, and physical abuse.
Yeah, I guess to touch on it, he most definitely did steal money from me to supply his toxic habits, unfortunately. He would take rent money. He wasn't able to keep a job. So, I was supporting him already to a certain degree. There was times too where he would take money from my parents as well. And
emotionally, what kinds of things did he make you believe about yourself?
He would call me names. He also made me feel really bad about the fact if I did call the police on him. He said if I did that it meant I didn't love him and I didn't care about him. And there was, it got to the point where he would start taking my keys and my shoes and my phone so I wouldn't leave or call the police for help.
Physically, I think often when people don't people don't know, and it's so personal and different for every person. The trigger point sometimes is when something turns physical. It not always is. Was it for you?
The way I speak of it, I say, no, he didn't like hit me or punch me or slap me, but there was other physical altercations. Like he would restrain me to the point where I was kind of being choked out, or he would kind of flip me down onto the ground, just stop me from leaving. And then other cases where he would be throwing things that would be most likely in my direction, and those items would hit me.
Yeah. You said, at first it took some time to recognize it as abuse. Why do you think that is? Like, just in your bigger understanding also about the trying to help other people?
I think for myself, because I was so invested in this relationship and we had already had a good 2 years together, and I thought this was the partner that I was supposed to be my life partner and end up with. And like I said, I thought that maybe I wasn't being a good enough girlfriend to him, and it was my fault that he was having these behaviors. So I was trying to better myself or serve him to see if it would stop. But then again, being stuck in that mindset, I think, is what kept me in that relationship for so long. I also did notice when I did try to break off the relationship that it kind of did put me in a dangerous situation where he would become aggressive. There was a few stalking cases too when I would try to separate, where he'd be waiting for me outside of my workplace, and just always wanted to know where I was.
So there was a cost to recognizing.
Yeah. And I think too, the last thing that was the cutoff with him is when he broke into my apartment and broke my door down. And I think all the other times when he came over, I always let him in because I had that fear of him breaking the door down. And finally, I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm putting my foot down. I don't want him in my space. And then by him breaking the door down, that led to me calling the police.
So what was your experience with calling the police, and what challenges did you face as well in the justice system?
Well, again, through at least 2 years of the toxic relationship, I did reach out to police. The police that I did deal with in those situations, I didn't feel supported, or was more like, you guys can't be making noise after a certain time. And I felt kind of chaotic because when the police would show up, he would be really calm and I'd be more frantic and kind of worked up from crying or just being in those environments. So I kind of felt like it looked like I was maybe the one that was causing more harm. And then there was one incident too where I had to leave the apartment. I didn't have my phone, so I had flagged down a police officer car. And kind of explained to them, and they said they were busy dealing with something else and they could drop me off somewhere if I waited. But to me, I'm like, it's 2 a.m. in the morning. I don't have shoes. I don't have my keys. I don't have my phone. And they kind of made it seem like, it was my fault. So I just went back home to my abuser and spent the night there with him.
How do we do better? Obviously, you're an advocate for this now. I'm wondering what you think is needed the most right now to help people who are in the situation as you were.
I think education, for our police officers, but also just for all the other support systems in place, and just to be patient and also feel comfortable. Because like I said, for me, in my case, I knew if I did try to leave, it was dangerous in some situations. And I've known friends and who've also been in dangerous situations, and sometimes even going through getting a restraining order, it still didn't protect them. So kind of looking at the bigger picture and seeing how we can either catch it earlier, educating ourselves to know when to break away from the relationship, and knowing what other resources aside from police that we can reach out to.
What might those be? I was going to ask what your message would be to those listening who might be experiencing intimate partner violence.
Yeah, I would highlight the Women's Health Clinic. They do have a great counseling program there, and then we're usually connected with a lot of other community-based programs that we would be able to, direct folks, because again, everyone's experience is a little bit different. So I feel like there's something a little more catered to each of them if they did reach out, and just knowing too that it is okay to reach out. There are also women's shelters that are available. I had only used their helpline to talk with them. I didn't actually physically leave to go there, but I think they're also another really great resource.
If you mentioned other supports as well. Some people might be supporting and not realize that they're either saying or doing the wrong thing, or they're missing something. What are some of the misunderstandings that people have about those who experience domestic abuse?
I think it's so easy to tell someone just to leave. And I think in my mind too, I'm like, oh yeah, I should just walk away from this. but there was a lot more emotional attachment because this is someone who I did love and I cared about. So I had that aspect of like a breakup is already bad, but then I'd also had all these other layers of danger. And then also I did worry for his mental well-being as well, until I realized like he's not my responsibility. He's an adult. He has to take accountability. So I think too, a lot of my friends were frustrated, but really I just asked for patience from them and trying to understand the statistics of it and how it does take usually more than the first time of trying to leave an abusive relationship to actually leave.
How are you doing now?
I think I'm doing really great. I'm 3 years out of the relationship. I've learned a lot about myself. I'm speaking more publicly about it and seeing the difference that I'm able to make to support other people.
What do you love about yourself that maybe he would have told you that, you know, if you felt, I don't know, less than or worthless or whatever you're describing the messages he might have put in your head. What do you love about yourself now?
I love of how I think I'm a powerhouse and just multi-talented in the work that I do, and that I'm growing. And I think I'm, you know, in that relationship, I didn't feel like I could grow anymore. It's like he kept me in a cage and very close to him so I wouldn't grow too much to realize that I'm better than this. So yeah, I'm most definitely better than that relationship as a whole. And I'm just a really amazing person. Well
put. Thank you so much for coming in, Sarah. It does a great deal of good to so many people. I can't even like understate that, of course, as you know. So appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Wow, right? Wow. So much strength in that interview. Sarah is who you heard from there. She's a survivor of intimate partner violence. And I just want to reiterate something because if this is about sharing resources where we live in Manitoba, I just want to share this one because Clinic Community Health, Clinic with a K, has a phone number that you can call. It's toll free if you need help, assistance, supports. And it's this. It's 1-888-322-3019. Well, one of the things that we did not really delve into in a lot of detail in that conversation, at least, was what do you do if you're at that moment where you are preparing to leave a relationship and you need somewhere to go? On the podcast next, we're going to look at how Canada's housing crisis right now has a knock-on effect for those people in society that are the most vulnerable. And I'm talking about women who are looking for shelter. Women's Shelters Canada put out this new study. It describes how women are scrambling to find stable housing when they escape domestic violence. Their report's called Shelter Voices 2024, Crisis Within Crisis. So one of the things that you're about to hear is that more women and children are staying longer in these shelters because there's literally nowhere for them to go. Robyn Hoogendam is Research and Policy Manager. She's with Women's Shelters Canada. Here's what she had to say about it.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being with us. Man, we've been talking about this for a long time. Certainly in Manitoba, I know constantly we're hearing from people who work in this, in the shelters that we just need more space, need more help. What's the picture of the situation that you found across Canada?
Largely the same. Shelters are at an overcapacity, which means that they're forced to turn women away every day. So they're able to offer outreach and support services to those that they can't provide a bed. But with the housing crisis, we're seeing women residing longer and longer in shelter, which means there aren't new spaces available. And I do want to emphasize this doesn't mean women shouldn't reach out to shelters for support. They'll absolutely do everything they can to provide a space and to connect you to other resources. But we are hearing that women are staying much longer in emergency shelters. These are spaces that were designed to be for 30 to 90 days, and we're hearing about people staying for a year or more. And these definitely weren't designed to be long-term housing.
And are they staying with their kids? What's the reality of that, if they have kids?
Absolutely. There are lots of people who are coming in with their children, and so yes, they're often staying with their children.
What are the challenges in finding affordable rent in most Canadian communities? Because part of the longer stays is, as you alluded to, if you do seek something outside of a shelter, it's often not affordable. So what's that reality?
The reality is that for many that are coming into shelter, they don't have the financial stability to find market rent. We know the market rent system isn't working for many, and these are folks that are often accessing income supports, and those are too low to find rental spaces. And we're seeing that across the country. And that's particularly true for those that have families, as you mentioned. So if you're trying to find a rental that accommodates multiple children, that can be an added difficulty, as those are more limited than studios and one-bedrooms that exist. And we sometimes see that there are many helpful landlords, but there are also many that aren't accepting larger families. And with the crunch in the housing market, there's more ability to really choose who you're willing to rent to. So that's making things really challenging. And people are ending up in, very limited term leases, and spaces that aren't safe, or aren't suited to their needs.
We had a big feature interview this week with a woman who shares her story to raise awareness about how she exited an abusive relationship. But she talked about, what that meant for her and how long that process took. And for her, when she finally left, I just can't imagine when you get to that point, then, where are you going to go? So if you do go to a shelter and then despite their best efforts, they can't, accommodate you, what are the emergency options that people are undertaking, especially given what you've said about affordable housing lacking?
Yeah, they're choosing between really dangerous options often and really difficult options. So we hear about women who are couch surfing, so staying with friends and family. They're trading housing for work, or they're moving into some form of homelessness. And for women, that's often invisible. So things like living in your car, or people are returning to violent relationships, or they're staying in violent relationships. And so all of this is leading to women being unsafe and having to make these horrible decisions. And we always hear this sentiment that you should just leave a violent relationship. And I think when you hear these options, you can understand it's really not that simple a decision to make.
I want to move to solutions, but not just, obviously, as you said, different housing options in looking at market rent. But what specific types of housing should be built to accommodate this specific issue and challenge? Are you seeing examples of successes in Canada anywhere?
Absolutely. And what we encourage is sort of a continuum of options for folks that have experienced violence. And so that looks like emergency, which is that short 30 to 90 days. And then there's a transitional step that is usually more like a year to 2 years. And that is often still a program that provides wraparound support, so counseling, employment supports, and support to find your own housing once you're ready to leave that. And so that's that intermediary step. And then there need to be affordable options that people can move to that are independent. And we're starting to see shelters even look at getting into that space as well, providing affordable housing in the long term for women. But there's very limited funding to develop all of those stages. And so we need investment in this, and we really need an all-of-government approach to how we support these vulnerable populations.
Where in the country has something been built that you're like, follow this model?
So this transitional housing, there are some great examples of it across the country. We're really proud to have been involved in a project in Sussex, New Brunswick that just launched yesterday. So that is, I believe, 5 new units, and those will, in a very small community. So they're small numbers, but a small community, and that'll fill a big gap for that organization and for that community, and that'll provide housing for a year or so, in addition to the emergency shelter that is providing the short term. And we're also, in BC in particular, we're starting to see organizations develop what they're calling third stage. And so after transitional spaces that really are designed for people to be there for more like 4 or 5 years. And it's that chance to stabilize. And that's what's really key for those that have experienced violence. Is you don't heal in 30 or 90 days, and you don't necessarily heal in 1 year. So knowing that you still have this support through that process so that you can move towards the independence in your timeline that works for you.
I appreciate this morning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So that's a conversation about the new reports that Robyn Hoogendam was talking about there. She's a research and policy manager with Women's Shelters Canada. And the report's called Shelter Voices 2024 Crisis Within Crisis. I encourage you to check out their website and read more about it, because obviously in our conversations we can only share so much. The other thing that you might want to read a little bit more about is something that was also announced this year that has to do with people in crisis and people looking for shelter and housing, which is what we're all talking about today. So Canada Housing Benefit Program, this is something new. Manitoba's government and the federal government have earmarked some money. It's $27.5 million. It's going to be spent over 5 years. It's a new funding stream, and it is specifically to support housing for gender-based violence survivors. So read more, and hopefully you'll listen to us again. This is Manitoba, and we invite you to follow and share.